read verses 6 through 12 in chapter 1. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and avoids evil? Then Satan answered the Lord. Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for nothing? Hast not thou made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. So, I've always thought this was so fascinating, how Satan was allowed to go and hang out with God. And I also thought it was fascinating how God would let Satan do what he's going to do to Job. But what I also, my biggest thing that I wondered about is why? Why Job? What's so special about Job? Why would God say that? Have you considered my servant Job? Well, Job was holy. Job was a guy that lived the lifestyle of the holy and righteous. And that's what I want to look at today. Because that's some things that we should consider. How we live our life. I personally would like to be somebody that God would say, Have you considered my servant Bill? But if we don't live in a certain way, not that God wouldn't love us, because he does, but for God to notice what we do. Not in a prideful way, in an obedient way. So, I want to go back and read the first 5 verses just to give an idea of what part was making Job this kind of a guy. It says, There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and avoided evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men in the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one on his day, and sent and called their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings, according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. This did Job continually. So, and that was another thing I wanted to say is, I had this outline written and these scriptures picked out a week ago. And you're going to hear some things that are going to be a little bit familiar to what we learned yesterday. And I wanted to make sure Josh knew that I didn't run home yesterday afterwards and hurry up and write something. But Job, even clear back here, was bearing the burdens of his sons. And he was obedient to God, and that he wanted to make sure that they were covered. Not just himself, but his sons. And so that's the kind of guy that Job was. He was very obedient. And then we skip ahead to verse 13. in Job, and we start to see what's going to happen here. It says, I'm not going to read all this. I just want to tell you what the story is in my words. So God had given Satan permission to touch Job's family and everything he has, but not his person. He wasn't allowed to do anything to Job, just his stuff. Well, Satan, he started out really hard when these guys were all together someplace, and what they did was on the sons, the 7 sons, they would have big meals on their birthdays. We do that. I don't know if you guys all do, but we all get together on anybody's birthday in my family on the Saturday before that date. You will find all of us in one house. That's just how we do. But there's not a lot of us anymore, so it's really easy to do. But Job's sons, they would do that. On their birthdays, they would have a big meal. They'd have all their brothers and their sisters, families. So when Satan started out, he just wiped all of them out all at once, one day. And then he took out all of Job's property, his animals, all of his everything. That's how fast that Satan attacked Job. And that's all in verses 13 through 19. But in verse 20 is so odd for any man that had just suffered this stuff. I mean, Job just lost everything he owned, and his kids. And here's what Job does. Then Job arose, rent his mantle, and shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. He worshipped God. He didn't get mad. He didn't say there is no God. He didn't go against God. He worshipped him. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. So, what made Job like that? Other than his faith and being obedient to God, what did he have in here that was different than somebody else? In the book of James, and I refer to this verse a lot. This is one of my life verses. In James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, tells us to count it a joy when we face trials and temptations. And the reason that we face trials and temptations and call that a joy is because when we do that, we get closer to God. If you have the scriptures in your heart that brings you to the Lord during trials and temptations, it will bring you closer to Him every time you go through something instead of turning away. Because that's when people turn away from the Lord a lot of times. How many people do you know that go to church on Christmas and Easter? You know, they want a Savior, but they don't want a Lord. And when things get bad, they turn away because they don't study the Word and have it buried in their heart. And that's what James is talking about in the first part of the book. And somehow Job knew this. Just by his faith in God and his obedience, he already had an understanding of turning to God instead of turning away, which his wife didn't, and we're going to talk about that later. And then another one of my life verses that I live by is in Psalms. Psalms 37. And you can turn there if you want. Psalms 37, starting in verse 4, says, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So in this Psalm 37 and the whole psalm, but specifically in these two verses, we learn that if we delight ourselves in the Lord and in his ways, I'm going to push a button on that. I know I am. So if something comes on, I'm sorry. Because I'm a fidgeter. If we delight ourselves in his ways, if we delight ourselves in his law, if we want to live by his way, it's not a matter of, I got to get up and go to church. It's, I get to go. It's not a matter of, I can't do that. It's a matter of, why would I want to? It's a matter of, I got to take time to pray today. It's, I want to. I get to go pray today. I get to spend time with the Lord. I get to open my Bible. I get to have a devotion at night. It's not a, I have to, it's a, I want to. And that's the difference. That's if we delight ourselves in the Lord, if we want to do it. One time I talked about husbands and wives and being a Christian and following the Lord, because people will tell you, you don't have to be in church every time the door's open. Well, you don't have to sleep with your wife either. But you want to. Don't you want to be with the Lord? That's just the way it is. You have to delight in the Lord. And that's something that Job knew already. Job delighted in the Lord. Job was very obedient. He did everything because he wanted to, not because he had to. And part of that is committing everything to the Lord. So from the way we eat to the way we drink, the way we work to the way we socialize, the way we relax, even the way we sleep, all these things need to be committed to the Lord. How do we? How do we work? How do we play? What do we eat? What do we drink? We all do things we shouldn't do. I mean, I've said this at men's breakfast more than once. I live with temptation, and I fall into it, and I wear it right out in front where everybody can see it. I'm the guy 4 hours at the buffet. That's just, I like to eat, and I know it's wrong. It's gluttony. It's not any different than any other sin. And I work with it, and I pray about it, and the Lord helps me, and then I fall right back. Everybody has something, but we take it to the Lord, and we let the Lord help us with it. But we commit everything to the Lord, and it's easier because we're already looking to the Lord. Because he's not gonna, if I walk into the Chinese buffet, he's not gonna come down and say, hey, you only get one plate today. I gotta be looking for him. I have to be looking for his help. And that's how we have to live our lives. And that's how Job lived. So that's one of the reasons that God said to Satan, hey, have you considered my servant Job? He follows what I say. So, verse 8 in Psalm 37 says we have to cease from anger and forsake wrath. It only causes harm. And I can vouch for that from personal experience, that getting mad does not fix anything. Getting mad only makes it worse. And that's another example we see from Job. He didn't get mad. He didn't get angry. Well, I'm sure he was angry in his heart, but he didn't show it. He didn't throw a fit. I know you wouldn't know it now knowing me, but prior to 1993, I was an angry young man. And I had a terrible temper. And I did some dumb things with my temper. And I broke a lot of things with my temper. And when you get mad, it just makes things worse. And in 93, something happened that the Lord took that away from me. And I'll tell you that another time. That's a long story. But angry is okay if you don't let it turn into sin. The Bible tells us that. But getting mad about things will not fix it. It will not make it better. So Psalms 37 verse 8 says, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Verse 9 says, evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. And Psalm 11 says, the meek shall inherit the earth and will delight in peace, delight themselves in peace. So we're talking about the meek, and we're talking about the ones that follow the Lord. Meek doesn't mean weak. I hope everybody understands that. I'm meek. I'm not weak, but I am meek, and I purposely be that way because the Bible tells us to be that way. In Psalm 37, 18 and 19, the Lord knows the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed in the evil time, and in the days of famine they will be satisfied. So again, we're talking about people that live the right lifestyle of the holy and righteous. The Lord's going to take care of us in famine. He's going to take care of us in the end times. He's not going to leave us to go. He's going to take care of us. Living in the holy and righteous lifestyle is more about the rewards right now. You know, we sing songs about when the King is going to be here and when we're going to crown Jesus. But you know, there's nothing wrong with living under the kingdom of God right now. He is my authority. He is my King. So for me to live his way is to live these ways, like what Job did. So in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things." So think on positive things, not think on negative things. So that's a list of the positive things to think on. And then we have in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 25 is the fruit of the Spirit. More positive things to think on. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. Keep these things in your heart. The more of this kind of thing we keep in our heart, the more we're going to be like Job was when God told Satan, "Consider my servant Job." If we don't have these things in our heart, it leaves room for all the other things that we don't want in our heart. It leaves room for all the lusts of our flesh. It leaves room for anger. It leaves room for hate. It leaves room for not liking what we have to do. It changes everything if we don't keep our heart full with these things. In Philippians, I titled that as a clean heart, is knowing those things. And then in Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit, I mean, we've all learned these things in Sunday school. We just need to relearn it. We just need to restudy it. We just need to rebring it into our lives. And then in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11, says, "Not eye service of men, but servants of Christ." Not to do these things just so people can see, but do these things because you want to do it for Christ. You do it for the Lord, not so that somebody can see you doing it. And this brings us back to the earlier part in Psalms 37 is when we commit things to the Lord. I use this a lot as an example in men's breakfast, I know, but it's how you work, because the Bible tells us to work as unto the Lord, not as unto men. So when you go to work as a Christian, it's important that you are the hardest worker in the place. It's important that you do what you are supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, because that carries your witness. And even as a customer, I've worked most of my life in customer service type things. And I gotta say that a lot of the worst customers that I've dealt with are preachers and church people. And it's embarrassing, because now, as someone serving the Lord, I go to work every day and I do my best. And I don't go in and preach to people, but I want them to know who I am, what I am, and I'm there for them. But then you have people come in that they know are Christians or they know are preachers because they make sure everybody knows who they are. And they're terrible customers. They complain. They carry on. They expect more than they should get. And that's not doing things committed to the Lord. So that's why these things are important for us to keep in our heart, to do things as we would to the Lord and not as to man. And then Ephesians 6:14 through 17 is our protection. That's the armor of God. We all learned the armor of God when we were in Bible school. Bible school is actually where I got saved. Back in the 70s, things were different. My school bus driver was a preacher. And so every day leading up to the end of school, he made sure that we all knew when Bible school was going to be. And he made sure we all knew where the church was. He drove past it on his bus route. So he knew that we all knew. And he would send flyers home, to your parents, because you're allowed to do that kind of stuff back then. And he would call the house and say, hey, this is so-and-so. I want your child to come to Bible school. And his name was Bill Branningham. He was a great pastor. And but it was a Bible school that I accepted Jesus. So it's a very, Bible school is huge for me. That's a very important thing that we do. But that's where we learn about the armor of God. The helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the shoes of the gospel of peace. And these are all things that we learn. And why do we learn them if we don't need to use them? So these are things that we need to bury in our heart so that in our daily lives, we're doing these things. So we can be, not that we want what happened to Job, but we want to be out there. We want God to recognize us, that we're living for him. We don't want to just be hiding in a corner somewhere, just getting by the skin of our teeth and hoping for the best. So I want to go back to Job. Back to Job 2. I seem to have took out my bookmark, so you're going to have to give me a minute. So, Job chapter 2, the first 6 verses, Satan comes back. Satan comes back to see God again. And God says to him, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, yeah. And God says, what do you think? He's not giving in. He hasn't cursed me. And Job says, let me touch his body. And he will. And so God said, okay. I just, when we read this and we study this, God had a lot of faith in Job. And sometimes it's scary because you think, I want God to know that I'm faithful to him. I want God to see that I'm living the way that he wants me to live because I want to live that way, not because I think I have to live that way. But I don't want him to really have that much confidence in me either because of what he did to Job. So Satan comes back to Job. And he touches Job's body. And then Job gets sick. And he has these boils. And he's miserable. And he's living in pain. Some of us live in pain. But not like Job's pain. This is serious pain. And so Job still doesn't curse God. Job does curse the day he was born. But he doesn't curse God. And his wife, she doesn't understand. And in verse 9, Job's wife tells him to curse God and die. That's how she was standing behind him. Now, we really can't blame her a whole lot because she just didn't get it. She loved her husband. She didn't want to see her husband suffer. And in her mind, everything that was happening to him was coming from God, so curse God and die and don't suffer anymore. Because she didn't understand. Job, he understood. So before we get mad at Mrs. Job, we have to realize how many people live in this life as a Christian that don't get it. How many times do people come up to you because they know you're a Christian, they know you go to church, they know you read the Bible, and they ask you, why do bad things happen to good people? Because they don't get it. We can explain it. It's a long story. But if they're asking you that question, they don't understand this. They don't understand God's word. Because the first thing you have to do is you have to accept the Lord, and you have to have the Holy Spirit right here, or you can't understand it. So, in closing, living a holy and righteous lifestyle is what made Job able to maintain his faith and his integrity. He cursed the day that he was born, but not God. Now, just realize this was in chapter 27. There's 41 chapters in the book of Job. So from the beginning to just past the middle, Job is still worshiping God, even though everything that's happened to him. Now, it does get a little worse, and I recommend that everybody read that book and know it. That was my grandma's favorite book of the Bible. And so all growing up, I heard a lot about Job. But again, he cursed the day he was born, but not God. Even against what his wife and his friends said, he still stood alone and worshiped God because he had all the good in here. He lived a holy and righteous lifestyle.